A man in a small Brazilian town circled 3 days on a calendar March 12th to 15th, 2026, then told the world to start stockpiling water and cash. The unsettling part isn't the warning itself. It's that real power grid engineers quietly watch the exact same window every time the sun grows restless. This is the man his followers swear named the year a pandemic froze the planet and the season a beloved queen would die. But before those 3 days, you need to meet the two wars, he says, arrive first. They call him the living Nostradamus. His real name is Athos Salome, born in 1986 inches, a town most maps don't bother labeling. He's not a general, not a scientist, not a spy. He's a self-described parapsychologist who built a global following posting eerie forecasts on TikTok and YouTube. And the reason millions take him seriously isn't the costume or the candles. It's a track record his fans treat like prophecy, a list of hits they replay every time he opens his mouth about the future. Start with the big ones. Before COVID had a name, Salome says he warned of a shadow that would halt humanity, a biological threat that would stop the world cold. In 2022, he spoke of the departure of a great matriarch months before Queen Elizabeth II died at 96. He gestured at unrest east of the old continent before Russia rolled into Ukraine. Skeptics call it vague horoscope language stretched to fit. Believers call it a man who keeps seeing the headlines early. Either way, people are listening now. So when Salome released his map for 2026, it spread fast, and it reads less like astrology and more like a threat assessment. Two full-scale wars in places almost nobody is watching. A single 3-day window in March he calls his most important warning yet. A cyber attack aimed at the banks of an entire continent. And underneath all of it, a phrase he keeps repeating like a drumbeat: a new world order, taking shape while we argue about everything else. Here's where it gets unsettling. The two wars he points to aren't in the headlines you'd expect, not Taiwan, not the Middle East front pages. He says the next great power collisions happen in two of the emptiest places on Earth. Almost no cameras, almost no witnesses. Which, if you think about it, is exactly how a fire spreads before anyone smells smoke. Let me show you the first one, a stretch of Africa most people couldn't find on a globe. When Salome laid out 2026, he didn't give one warning, he gave a whole calendar of them, and the spread is what unsettles people. Two wars. A solar event with a date. A cyber attack on an entire continent's banks. A new bird flu variant. And running through all of it, a phrase he repeats like a refrain. This is the year the old world order cracks and a new one starts forcing its way in. Let's walk it, piece by piece, because the pieces fit together in a way that's hard to unsee. Take the money first. Salome predicts that somewhere between February and April 2026, a large-scale cyber attack hits European banking systems. The plumbing that moves money between banks, the settlement layer almost no one thinks about until it freezes. If transfers stall across a continent for even a few days, salaries don't land, market seize, trust evaporates. He frames it as a deliberate strike, part of a larger pattern of nations testing how fragile our wired-together world really is. And he says it lands in the same season as everything else. That phrase, New World Order, is the spine of his whole forecast. Salome warns 2026 is a turning point where artificial intelligence stops being a tool and starts being a weapon. Deepfake propaganda, so convincing that nations can no longer agree on what's even real. Fake speeches, fake footage, fake confessions, dropped at the perfect moment. In a year, he says, is already stacked with wars and blackouts, his darkest claim might be this: that we won't be able to trust our own eyes when it matters most. He doesn't stop at conflict and code. Salome flags a new strain on the horizon, H5N5 bird flu variants, and warns that global monitoring needs strengthening before, not after, it spreads. In the same breath, almost as relief, he predicts medical leaps. treatments that slow aging, that repair cells, even the early arrival of genetically enhanced humans he calls smarter, stronger, more resistant to disease. Light and shadow in the same year. A world breaking and rebuilding itself at the same time. Now, the honest part. Salome is a self-described psychic, not an analyst, and every one of these is an unverified claim. Critics point out that his past hits were worded loosely enough to fit almost anything: a great matriarch, a shadow over humanity, trouble in the East. Stretch a sentence far enough, and the future will eventually walk into it. But here's what keeps even doubters scrolling. This year, his vague visions line up uncomfortably well with things real experts are already worried about. And that's exactly why the two wars deserve a closer look. Because when you strip away the candles and the mysticism, the places he names aren't fantasy. They're the two regions intelligence agencies quietly list as the most likely flashpoints nobody's covering. Let me take you into the first one, a war he says won't even look like a war at first. No declaration, no front line, just a vacuum, and everyone rushing to fill it. The first is the Sahel, that brutal band of desert and scrub stretching across Niger, Chad, Mali, and Sudan, just south of the Sahara. For a decade, French and American forces held the line there against extremist groups. Then the West withdrew, base after base, and the line dissolved. Salome predicts those groups surge into the gap and that outside powers fight each other through them: proxies, mercenaries, quiet cash rather than face-to-face. A war with no clear front, burning in a place with almost no cameras. Why bleed over a region this poor? Because it's only poor on the surface. Beneath the Sahel lies gold, uranium, and some of the planet's richest untapped mineral seams, the raw fuel for reactors, batteries, and every screen in your pocket. Russian paramilitary outfits already operate across it. Western firms want back in. Salome's claim cuts clean. The powers that walked away get dragged back, and they collide in the dark, far from any newsroom, over the metals that quietly run the entire modern world. But here's where it gets really interesting. The second war he predicts unfolds in the last place you'd ever stage a battle, a frozen emptiness with no cities, no borders, no one to bomb. And yet Salome says this is where two nuclear superpowers come nearest to open confrontation in 2026. The reason is something that's been silently vanishing for 20 years, opening doors that used to be sealed by ice. He's talking about the top of the world, the Arctic. As the ice retreats, it exposes two prizes every great power craves: new shipping lanes that carve weeks off global trade, and vast reserves of oil and gas frozen out of reach for millennia. Salome predicts Russia moves aggressively, pushing missile systems and military hardware into strategic Arctic positions, and that this provokes direct confrontation with NATO. Not proxies this time, a face-to-face standoff between Moscow and the Western Alliance, at the roof of the planet, over ground that was always too frozen to be worth dying for. Look at what he's actually sketched. Two wars, both in the emptiest corners of the map, both fought over the resources the future depends on: rare metals, energy, sea routes thawing open, both pitting the same few nations against one another through different doors. This isn't random doom. It's one contest for control, erupting in two theaters at once. And Salome insists they're not the main event of 2026. They're the backdrop, the noise covering something he says hits everyone, everywhere, on 3 specific days. Here are the 3 days. March 12th to 15th, 2026, the window Salome circled and called his single most important warning. Not soldiers, not hackers. The Sunday, he claims a burst of coronal mass ejections, massive eruptions of charged plasma, will be hurled straight at Earth in that window, slamming into the magnetic field that shields us and, in his words, triggering mass global panic as the lights go out across continents. And before you laugh it off, this is the one prediction grounded in hard science. Solar storms are real, and a big one has done this before. In 1859, the Carrington event set telegraph wires on fire and lit up skies worldwide. In 1989, a single storm knocked out the power grid for all of Quebec in 90 seconds, leaving millions in the cold and dark. Our world today runs on far more fragile electronics than 1989 ever did. Salome didn't invent the threat. He just put a date on it. Picture the window he's pointing at. A severe solar storm doesn't just dim the lights, it can fry the transformers that take months to replace, scramble GPS, knock out aviation routes, and silence the satellites your phone, your maps, your banking quietly depend on. Stack that on top of a continent's banks already reeling from a cyber attack and two wars burning in the shadows, and you start to see why his calendar reads less like horoscopes and more like a worst-case stress test of everything modern life leans on. Now, the sober truth: no scientist on Earth can predict a specific solar storm 3 months out. The sun doesn't send a schedule. Space weather agencies can only warn us hours to days ahead once a flare is already on its way. So Salome's exact dates are a leap of faith, not physics. But here's the part that lingers: solar activity is genuinely near a peak right now. The odds of a major storm in 2026 are real, and he picked a window inside it. Coincidence or something else? So what do you do with a man like this? You can dismiss him as a showman draping old fears in mystic robes, and you might be right. But strip the costume away and look at what's left on his 2026 map. 2 resource wars in regions experts already call powder kegs, a banking system one breach from chaos, an AI that's erasing the line between real and fake, and a sky that has, twice in living memory, reached down and switched off our world. None of that requires magic to believe. Which brings us back to the 3 days I promised you. March 12th to 15th, 2026, the dates the living Nostradamus circled, and the same narrow window real grid engineers watch every time the sun grows restless. Maybe nothing happens and we laugh in April. Maybe the lights flicker and we never forget his name. Either way, mark them. Because the most unsettling thing about a prophecy isn't whether it's true. It's that you'll be watching the calendar when those days arrive, and so will he. That's the story. If you'd watch one more like this, hit subscribe, and I'll have another ready soon.